What is the evidence that systems of graded observations improve performance? And Matt has been doing a lot of research on this, and I've read his PhD, he will be pleased to know, and I enjoyed every minute of it. So, Matt, would you like to kick us off on that?
Okay. Well, the short and simple response to this question is there is no evidence that supports the idea that a graded approach to lesson observation actually improves performance. And in fact, quite the opposite. My own empirical research provides a substantial bank of evidence that highlights the counterproductive and detrimental impact of this particular form of intervention on the professional identity, learning and development of teachers. And I think there are a number of myths, misconceptions, and unintended consequences surrounding graded lesson observations that it's important to openly discuss if we're to develop an evidence-based, informed understanding of the use and impact of this particular intervention on practitioners in the sector. And the first one I think it's important to highlight is this notion of a multi-purpose misconception. So most colleges' observation policies are invariably underpinned by a range of purposes, most of which can broadly be categorized into two camps: the performance management camp and the professional development camp. Now, in practice, what tends to happen is the professional development camp is invariably the loser, because the emphasis is all about performance management and collecting data for what's often referred to in the sector as the college grade observation profile. Now, this grade observation profile, practitioners in the room will be familiar with this. This is all about collecting a set of statistics on a year-by-year basis, whereby you have a profile of individual practitioners' grade results divided into curriculum areas. What's the purpose of that? Well, that's simply for senior management teams to pore over these statistics on a year-by-year basis under the guise that they're tracking somehow performance, improvement in the performance of individual staff. And of course, don't forget, it's what's seen as the so-called robust evidence base to present to external agencies like OFSTED. The second thing is this notion of the myth of measurement. And this, for me, is a really crucial one. There's this deceptive allure about the use of the OFSTED 4-point scale. Because you use a number, people are seduced into believing that these judgments have some kind of scientific basis. They purely don't. There's an implicit assumption that these grades have some kind of objective value comparable to calibrated measuring instruments, like a set of weighing scales or a thermometer. Whereas in fact, the real issue that they fail to address, and is not really discussed in any detail, is the subjective interpretation and judgments that are encompassed within these so-called scientific grades. And the final point that I'd really like to make, talking about the impact of graded lesson observations, is how it impacts quite negatively on teachers' professionalism and professional identity. And by this, I'm referring to these distorting, counterproductive consequences of grading on teachers' self-esteem, self-efficacy, along with notions of motivation and morale. So I think, to sum up, my interpretation of the way in which graded observation is used in the sector, it's become normalized as a performative tool of managerial systems fixated with measuring teaching performance rather than actually trying to improve it.
Thank you, Matt. Tony, you wanted to say something?
Yes. The Institute for Learning has a partnership with the University of Wolverhampton where Matt works, and we've jointly created a research and development centre called Cradle, and it is to try and bridge the gap of the evidence base and reaching large numbers of teachers and practitioners in the sector. So we'd be very interested from this event if you've got ideas of areas that you'd like Cradle and others to investigate further. I won't be as modest as Geoff, but in our current issue of Intuition, our professional journal, which hasn't quite hit the doorsteps yet, but will be in the next few days, but there is an article by him which has got the perfect title, sorry Frank, which is Why Grading Degrades Learning. So have a read, and it takes the argument further, also in relation to learners as well.
I've got a... Yeah, go on, Geoff. Yeah, I think
I'd
Paul
like
will allow us a couple of minutes to open.
Right.
Matthew,
Well,
do you
just
want
very
to-
quickly, Andrea Schleicher, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, is the person who does the PISA thing, you know? The OECD's device for comparing the education systems across the developed world mainly. And there's a wonderful TED video on the internet, should you be interested in it. It's really worth hearing. And he's talking about what the countries that do best in these in international comparisons in maths, English and science, what they have in common. And he says they do not have a compliance and accountability culture. They do not have that. Finland does not have OFSTED or its equivalent. I think it's got an equivalent of HMIs in the sense of being, the idea is growth improvement, not measurement. And there is a tremendous divide. I've read Matt's article in Intuition. It's a brilliant one on grading. It is well worthwhile. This keeps coming up, this Intuition, doesn't it? But it's an excellent article. And so I think, if the best countries aren't doing it, you begin to think that maybe we shouldn't be doing it either. Hattie's work on instructional leaders, the leaders that get the best for their students are the ones that look at teaching and learning and improving it, not measuring it. There's a lot, and Joyce and Schauser's work on CPD that actually affects students' achievement. They don't say grade, they say improve the communities of practice, supported experiments and so on.
I have to allow Matthew to come back at this point, and then we need to finish, I think.
Just a bit of myth busting, really. What we're interested in is in leadership and management is the professional development, the performance management. We're very clear about that, and we're looking for the evidence that the provider has to demonstrate that it understands the performance of its staff so that it can better target its CPD, etc. So that's simply the question that we ask. And we don't prescribe how people do it. We don't ask that they grade it. I was invited to a college yesterday for them they wanted to show how they've innovated in their approach, and I actually was more interested in talking to the staff than the principal about how they felt that they benefited from their particular approach. It was an approach that had been designed with and by the staff. It was an unannounced approach as well. They felt that it enabled their leaders to be able to see them operating as they do every day, rather than being anxious about a notified activity. This is one of the reasons why we started to trial and test no-notice inspections ourselves. But nevertheless, there is no prescription, but we are interested to know how teachers are supported, developed, and improved as a result.
There is no requirement that the college grades...
No, there isn't. No, there isn't.
No, there isn't. Well, that's an excellent clarification, Matthew.
Yes, that's a lovely way to finish.